So we're here to talk about adverse childhood experiences and so on, and the quiz that goes along with that. Are you okay talking about your ACEs score relative generally? You know, how you stack up with that?
Yes, I'm fine talking about that.
Okay. You want to say a word or two about how you answered some of those questions, or
Yeah. So, in looking at the questionnaire and quiz, there are 10 questions or 10 ACEs. And with the way that they are written, can tell you that I identify with at least 6 of those. Um, those include things like being verbally threatened or humiliated. I suffered from childhood sexual abuse from the age 12 to the age 16. I identify with there being a lack of support and closeness in my family, and speaking so that, I was raised in a great family but never felt really emotionally safe all the time. Never really questioned my physical safety at all, but emotional safety was a big thing. There was also some chronic depression. So that question about mental illness in your family, that was definitely there. My mom suffers from what I think is a lot of anxiety, and my dad suffers from some chronic depression. As I said, physically, I never, wondered about my safety, but emotionally, that was something that I wondered about a lot. Both my parents physically were always there in my life, but at times were very emotionally distant. So in some ways, I did feel a little abandoned sometimes. Like I said, not physically, but definitely emotionally.
right, right. How would you say you were affected by all that as you go out into the world and you go to school, or did you have any encounters with other professionals, healthcare, mental health care? How were you affected in all those outside the home scenarios?
Well, I definitely, as far as when my sexual abuse started, I think I was that child that I became like a chronic overachiever in school. So, as far as what people visualize and talk about as negative effects of adverse childhood experiences, I didn't really look like that kid. So, on the outside, I looked, overachieving, super functional. I didn't look tired. I didn't look any of those things, but I was definitely straight A's, perfect attendance. I was involved in, band, dance team, different things, in school. And so I think, I realized those are the things that I could control. And so those things, I just overdid all of those.
So you,
But,
you got a lot of compliments. People didn't know why you were working so hard.
right.
Yeah,
Um,
interesting.
but as far as negative experiences out in the world as I got older, I think I definitely began to experience some chronic depression. And because I was such an overachiever, with that comes a whole lot of anxiety. When you try to achieve things and you want to be a perfectionist and you want to do everything right. I did have a suicide attempt when I was earning my bachelor's degree. So I really feel like I was so depressed that I often say, I probably slept through the first 4 years of college because I was so depressed, and so I just didn't want to be involved. I was just tired all the time. I also had an eating disorder that came about, I think, as a huge symptom of what I had been through.
And
Definitely self-esteem issues, lots of anger issues.
were you treated for depression and eating disorder in any way?
So when I first went to therapy, because I, was holding on to this secret about my sexual abuse through my whole childhood. I probably told someone for the first time, set aside from friends that were the same age as me. So the first adult that I told, I was probably 19 years old. So I held on to my secret for a long time. And so I started therapy around the time I was 19 or 20. And I feel like, luckily, I had a good therapist that diagnosed me with PTSD. And she diagnosed me with that out of the gate. She definitely, didn't miss what I was dealing with. So I felt very fortunate in that way. I did get treated with medications to treat or to try and attempt to treat the depressive type symptoms. But I do find that truly long term, it doesn't do anything for me because I still experience the same feelings from the trauma.
As you're thinking back, is there anything that people could have done differently, whether it was schools or healthcare settings or family, friends, that would have been more helpful?
I think as far as my family setting, it would have been nice to have been in a family where communication was a little more open, and that I didn't feel like I had to hide everything that was going on with me all the time for fear of making somebody angry, disappointing somebody. I guess that's again the perfectionism, that I had on the inside. I think definitely as an adult being employed, I think there is a huge lack of understanding in larger companies, agencies, of trauma and what it does to someone over time. And so it may not be that, when you experience the trauma at a young age, some people begin to show symptoms then and can sometimes overcome those by the time they're an adult to the point that it doesn't affect them as much. I don't think the trauma ever goes away. But for me in particular, the negative effects of trauma didn't really show until later in life. And I found myself in jobs where my trauma was used against me. And so me, putting myself in a vulnerable space to say, this is why I'm struggling with my job, or this is why I'm not getting things done as fast as you would like, then the next thing I know, I get put on, probation at work, and I have this probationary period where, I just have to get my trauma in check so that I can do a job a certain way. So I think either we don't educate, or we educate and pretend that we listen, or people just don't care. They would just rather see you get a job done than you actually be a happy, healthy, physically and emotionally safe employee.
And these were work settings that knew something of your history.
Yes.
These were people, managers or supervisors, who knew something of your history.
Supervisor. Yeah. Actually, like I said, it ended up being a situation where the insight that I gave her about what was going on with me was used to harm me. So it was like punishment for my pain. I mean, it was a probationary period. It was, you're going to get fired if you don't, change the way you're working. And so it's re-traumatizing in a sense.
If you were supervising someone with your experience and so on like that, and you encountered that someone like you, how would you have responded differently? What would have helped?
I mean, I think it's important that, you sit down with a person and try your best to genuinely understand where they're coming from. Don't superficially, sit down with someone and ask, and don't threaten them with their pain. And I get that agencies have to function, and I get there's certain expectations, but for me personally, the more someone comes down on me because of what I'm feeling, the less functional I'm going to be. So I think it's important to meet people where they are and try to genuinely understand, and fix a problem in a way that works for the both of you. You know, it doesn't like punish people or harm them more, you know, and create a space that they just feel so dysfunctional or stuck or disappointing, or, you know, all of those things that they already feel on the inside because of the trauma that they've experienced.
Yeah, it seems like what these ACEs do, this research, and it shows how so often in our systems we don't understand human behavior.
Mm.
It happens a lot. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone that you encountered that was helpful, that was supportive?
Yes. I actually had a professor, my first 2 years of college, actually introduced me to my therapist. So in the way that he got some insight into what was going on with me is it was basically at the height of my eating disorder. And so I had him for 3 semesters in a row, and he noticed a significant amount of weight loss and just came to me, and, you know, he was like, Jessica, what's going on? And, you know, can I help you with what's happening? And so he introduced me to my therapist. And so, you know, there came the, you know, some bit of change in my life just with having her as a safe place and him as a safe place as well. And then fast forward to 2014, I decided to do something about the trauma that had been inflicted, and reached out to an assistant district attorney here in New Hanover County. Her name is Connie Jordan, and she inevitably changed the game that I had been playing for a very long time. And I use the word game lightly, but she helped me to put this man in prison 20 years later from the time of the incident. So I am very thankful for her response, and I'm very thankful for her faith in me as someone that she felt had the courage and had the strength to do what I needed to do to put him where he needed to be. And so in that way, I had a system work in my favor and not react to me in a negative way.
You must have trusted her a lot.
I did. I trusted her a lot. She's definitely easy to trust, and it was an instant feeling for me of trust and just sure that she was going to take care of me and she was going to take care of my story just the way I had, and make sure that everything went the best that it could go.
Finally, is there anything you would want to say to the people who didn't get it right, who misunderstood you? Is there anything you would want to say to any of those folks, if you could right now? It's a hard question.
It is, because there are things that I want to say to them that like aren't appropriate. I think it would be
well said.
Gain some insight. You know, learn to be genuine instead of superficial. Practice your transparency. Know that you are pointing fingers, you know, and pointing out the negative about someone else, but there's also a lot of turbulence on their own insides that maybe they need to get taken care of, because what they're projecting is way more harmful than it is helpful, even though they may call themselves helping. But what it did for me is harm me, and what I felt re-traumatized me so much later in life. So,
well, thank you.
Thank you.